So this is the thermostat demo that I'm going to show you how to make in ProtoPie. If you simply drag, you can see a number of things are happening. First, you can see the target temperature is changing. You also see these tick marks show up on the left-hand side. Also, if you noticed, some of the elements of the screen disappear so that you can really focus on the micro interaction. If you drag the target temperature above the current temperature, you can see that the color changes, and you also get this animation here indicating that it's currently heating to your target temperature from the current temperature. Similarly, you can also click on these buttons, which are the plus and minus signs, okay, and that will also change your temperature as well. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up ProtoPie Studio and click New Pi. For this particular demo, you don't need any assets. Everything in this demo, I'll walk you through how to actually build it in ProtoPie or how to retrieve assets online. So I'm going to go ahead and save this by doing Command S. Just to give it a name, and I'm going to call it Thermostat Demo. Save. I'm also going to change the device to an iPhone 10. Okay. And the first thing I'm going to do is give it a background. So let's go over here to our shapes, click rectangle. I'm going to give this a name of App Background, and I'm going to drag it to fill the whole screen. I'm going to come over here to the properties and change its color to EEE. Alright. And I'm going to go ahead and lock this because I don't need it for the rest of the demo. I'm going to make our slider. So let's go ahead and make another box. Now it looked like our background actually didn't change colors, so let me just do that one more time. There we go. Okay. Now here's our slider rectangle. I'm going to name this slider. And I'm actually going to put this inside of a container. I'm going to drag the container to be the full size of the screen, and I'm going to drag this slider into the container, and I'm going to name this BoxSlider. Okay. And this slider, I'm going to actually just make it have a position of 0, 0 for the X and the Y, and then I'm now going to move the whole box down. And I'll move it down to, let's say, 340. Alright. Now let's change the color of this slider here. Let's get an orange color. The one that I'm using is EEA05F. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make a perceived affordance here to make it appear as though this area can be draggable. So I'm just going to create a new shape, rectangle. I'm going to name this grabber. And I'm going to put it about right here and drag grabber right inside of my box slider container. The width, I'm going to make it, let's say, 80 with a height of 3. Maybe 80 is a little too much. Let's make it 50. Okay. And then I'm going to select it and drag it right in the middle. And then let's just bump it down 10 pixels like that. Also going to make this to be white, and I'll also just put a radius on that corner. So if I zoom in here, you can see it has a nice rounded edge. Now when you're using the radius right here, if you just want the whole thing to be completely rounded on each side, you can just drag this up all the way to 100. And it will work. Alright. So now what we're going to do is make it so that this can be dragged up and down. So let's go ahead and add a trigger, and let's add drag. And the thing we want to drag is our box slider, so we don't need to do anything there. And when I drag from the box slider, I also want the box slider to move. So I'm going to add that rule right here. And I only want it to move up and down. Okay, so now let's go ahead and preview it. Alright, so it looks like I can just drag this up and down like that. Everything looks good. Okay, now what else do we want to do? I actually don't want this to drag all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom. Okay, and I don't want it to drag so that I can see underneath as well. So I'm going to add some limits there. So I'm going to add some limits by clicking on limit and selecting custom limit. And I want my min y, that's going to be a y about this area right here, to be 120. And I'm going to have the max y, I want it to be somewhere down here. So I'm going to make that 720. Alright, so now let's go ahead and preview it again. And I'm going to actually move this out of the way to have our preview always be here for our reference. So now I can move it up to this point here and move it down to this point here. So that's my limit for dragging this. Alright. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a temperature reading right here for our target temperature. And so I'm going to click on text. Alright. I'm actually going to hold down shift and arrow over so that it is, let's say, 32 from the edge. Let's type in, let's say, 68 degrees. And the degree sign you get by selecting Option, Shift, and 8 on your keyboard. And let's make this a font size of 32. Alright. Now I'm going to also make this be our orange color. Alright. And so if I preview, it's going to cover up that temperature. So I actually don't want that. So now what I want to happen is I want this to move as I'm dragging this. So one way to do that is just to drag that right inside of the box slider. So now when I preview it, it follows the box slider. But what I also want to do is have this change based off of the position of my slider. Alright, so what I'm going to do there is I'm going to add a trigger. And I'm going to have this trigger be detect. Okay, so what I want to be detected, let me deselect that. What I want to be detected is actually the position of our box slider. And that's going to be the Y position. And what I want to happen is to have the text of our temp text change based off of this position here. So I'm going to have temp, short for temperature. And what I want to do is set up a formula. And this formula is going to say change this based off of the position of my slider. So I can click in here and click this function button, click the plus sign, and then have BoxSlider.y. Alright, so I'm going to click OK for that. Go over to my preview here, and you can see as I'm dragging it, those numbers are changing. Alright, but they're actually changing in the opposite way that I want them to change. So when I go up, I want the temperature to go up, and when I go down, I want the temperature to go down. Also, this range is definitely not what I want, so let's see what we can do there. So the first thing I'm going to do is to have the range change so that it's lower here and higher when we get on top. So how am I going to do that? Well, I know that this is an iPhone X sized screen, and I know that it is 812 points from the top to the bottom here. So if I just go to my formula, and type in 812, and I subtract the position of the slider from the whole height, what that's going to do is put this at 0, and wherever the y is going to creep up as a difference between 812 and the position of the y. Okay, so let's tab out of that. And now you can see that when I go down, my number is now going down, and when I go up, my number is going up. Well, what about the range? Well, I know that I can only slide this within a specific range here. So what is that range? Well, I'm going to have to remind myself by going over to Move, and I see that this range is 720 to 120. So I want to get the difference between that to get my full range. So I'm just going to go to my Spotlight search here, and you can actually do calculations in Spotlight. So I'm going to type in 720 minus 120, and that's going to tell me that my range is 600. Okay, so keep that in mind. The range from the top to the bottom is 600. But what do I want the range of the numbers to be? Well, I actually want the range of the numbers to be 40. Okay, I want to be able to slide from 45 degrees all the way to 85 degrees. So I know that that's 40. So let's go back to Spotlight here, and let's say 600 divided by 40. Well, that's a ratio of 15. Okay, so right now what this is doing is that every time I move 1 pixel, it's changing this by exactly 1, this number. And what I want to happen is for every 15 pixels, I want this to change by 1. Okay, so in order to do that, we got to go back to our formula. All right, and what we want to have happen here is I just want to take this whole number and put it in parentheses, and I want to divide it by 15. Let's commit that, and let's try it out. So we can see here that we're not only getting decimals, but now my range is between 6 to 46. So that's a range of 40. So I've got my range down the way I want it, but I definitely don't want these extra decimal places here. So what can we do there? Well, let's go back in here to our function. In this function area, you can see this question mark icon right there. If you click that, that'll take us to ProtoPie under the section called Formulas. In this section at the bottom, there's this area called Function, and in here you see that there are different functions that we have available to us. Okay, there are functions that help you to manipulate text. There are functions that help you to manipulate math and color and other things as well. So let's go to the math section, and if you don't know programming, you don't have to find this too intimidating. Here's an example of this particular function, which is the min function. And what this is saying is that if you have two numbers separated by a comma, and if you wrap those in parentheses and put min at the beginning, then it's going to return the smaller of those two values. This arrow here means it's going to return that thing. So if you look here to max, the example is max, parentheses, followed by two numbers separated by a comma. Well, that's going to return the larger of the two. The one that we're worried about and that we want to understand for our purposes is floor. Okay, so floor is going to take a number in parentheses, and it's going to return that number without any decimal places. So let's try that in our demo. Okay, so this is the number we're currently getting. I'm going to wrap this inside of parentheses here and type floor. Press the check mark to commit that. Let's try it. There we go. So this is looking good. We don't have our decimal places anymore. However, it still isn't the right set of numbers that I want. The range is correct, which is 40, but I want this to start at 45 degrees and end at 85 degrees. So if this is currently 6, I make this 45 by simply adding the difference between the two. So let me go to my Spotlight editor. 45 minus 6 is 39. So if I add 39 to this number, it's going to make it 45. Let's go back into our function and add 39, commit, and we can see 45 to 85, and that's looking pretty good. Okay, let's pause there, and we'll continue in the next video.